you're really passionate about spreading the voice of Lebanon. I think that's something that was a topic for us that we wanted to focus on today, the Lebanese perspective, because
Right.
Lebanon's very misunderstood, you can say, maybe in the world. Especially
100%.
nowadays, people think
Yeah.
Lebanon
100%.
just like some breeding ground for terrorism versus it's actually a
Yeah.
beautiful place with a huge amount of diversity, actually.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't really believe that the idea that Lebanese people are anti-Semitic or hate Israel because they're just Jewish, because we're
Not at
very
all.
diverse, actually, and we have Jews in
Mm.
Lebanon historically too, and we're such a
And
melting
still
pot of different
today,
cultures.
there's
Is
still
that
a
true?
Jewish community in Lebanon, yeah, in Beirut. And there's a synagogue which they've restored, and there's a little street with I don't know how many families, maybe 20 or 30 families that still live very peacefully. And I interviewed Saad Hariri about this. So it's like
Yes.
when I did his interview, it didn't make it into the film, but I will be releasing the full interview with
Okay,
him
cool.
along with a whole lot of stuff. But we can talk about it.
All right, I can't wait
Yeah,
for that one. Said,
yeah.
anything else?
Um, yeah, Daisy, it's great to have you. First of all, just to let the audience know a bit about you, if they don't. So, Daisy, you're an entrepreneur, you're an award-winning filmmaker, but you're also a journalist. But
Mm,
that's your main thing from the start. And
yeah.
for this episode, like that's what we're gonna be kind of focusing on because of what's happening in Lebanon right now. And like Ali mentioned, we want we want to share the Lebanese perspective to our audience because,
Mm,
for example, for me, I'm always having to explain what's happening to Lebanon and from our side, like why why is it that or is it considered that we're under attack? Why is it um, not our fault? Kind of thing. Like I always feel like I have to explain that situation
mm,
as if we're in the wrong. So maybe you can give us, a clearer picture and
mm.
people can easily understand.
Sure. I'd be my pleasure to, if I can. Some people don't want to learn. Some people, but we have to try and approach it from very different angles, and that's the most important thing. So, do you want me to start on that point? Is that
That
where
would
we'd
be
like to
great.
start?
Yeah, that's
Okay, so,
yeah.
okay, that's the intro. Okay, yeah, definitely. I'm so glad you're focusing on journalism because that is my core. That's absolutely who I am at the core, and then other things
Yeah.
have evolved. But you're right. Look, and this is the problem about Lebanon. It's as Ali said before, it's misunderstood. It's actually misrepresented. There's been a lot of misinformation about Lebanon for decades, and it
Hmm.
happened to
Hmm.
me as a child growing up in Australia, wanting to distance myself from being Lebanese because anything that I ever heard about Lebanon was very negative and dark. Terrorists, kidnappers, warmongers, unsophisticated, backward people, destruction. That was what I grew up understanding Lebanon was. But living with my family, my relatives, my friends was a very different energy and beauty and love
Yeah.
and sympathy and all of that stuff. But it was the reason I made my first documentary, Lebanon in Prison Splendor, because I wanted the world to see the full picture of Lebanon. And that was in the 1990s. And it was, I don't know if you've seen it, it featured Omar Sharif. And the only
Hmm.
reason he decided to
Yes.
participate in it was because it was about the full story of Lebanon and his love for Lebanon. If your audience doesn't know, Omar Sharif, while an Egyptian actor, is also of Lebanese origin. His family was from the Bekaa Valley Shtura in near Zahli, and his name was originally Michel Shalhoub. So we went into that too. So, but you're right. There's a complete misunderstanding, and to this day, Lebanese, because of the promotion and the PR campaign focused on Hezbollah, and this has been a strategic narrative that the West and not all countries, but your key English-speaking nations, particularly
Hmm.
America, Britain, Australia, And you have those countries that are aligned that all consider Hezbollah a terrorist organization, whereas probably 80% of the world's countries do not. They consider it a resistance force. And in Lebanon, it's a legitimate political party. But because of Hezbollah, it's been a very easy, easy way for the West to position Lebanon as a terrorist nation or being focused as a breeding ground for terrorists. And 9/11, it came out as well that some of the pilots or some of the terrorists that are involved in that campaign may have been from Lebanon. But I'm not going to go into that because that was debunked too, and all of those people turned out to be mostly Israeli. I don't know if you heard that, but if you saw the footage and news reports, been a lot of stuff that came out about that. Yeah. And all of the names that they came up were not real people. So they had manufactured these names and they weren't really people from Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan or whatever that they had created. So Lebanon, unfortunately, fell into this, this position where the narrative got taken over by those that wanted to control the arguments and the actions against countries like Lebanon, like the Palestinians, like Iraq, Syria, and all of that. But Lebanon is very unique in that it isn't and hasn't been historically a land of conflict. It was only in the Lebanese Civil War from 1975 to 1990 where it fell into this, disrupted our reputation, our history. And if you go back into Lebanon's history, it's quite an extraordinary nation for such a tiny piece of land. And that's what I like to explain to people and what I go into in my stories and why I went back to Lebanon, because much more has to be told in English about Lebanon. And one thing I want to say is, they've been able to hijack the narrative because we don't have a strong media presence globally. We don't have people speaking up for us. When I was deputy foreign editor at the Australian newspaper in Australia, working for Murdoch for, nearly 18 years, and I was one of the youngest foreign editors, my editor-in-chief said to me, I've never seen more stories about Lebanon make it into our newspaper. Because as a foreign, editor, you get to choose or pitch. You have to go into that news conference in the morning and pitch stories for the front page, for the world pages, whatever. And I said to him, have any of the stories been unjustified? And he said, no. And that this is the point. I was in a seat where I had power to review all the stories that were coming out on the day, at the time. And you had, multiple stories around the world. You had the collapse of the Berlin Wall, the disintegration of Yugoslavia, the outbreak of war in between Bosnia, Herzegovina and Serbia, Croatia and all that. So we were covering a lot of stuff. But the point is that you need people in those positions who know how to discern the information, to deliver that information up to their editors-in-chief and up the line to your, news editors, whether you're in TV, radio, and newspapers. And so the narrative, we've seen how the media has been hijacked by Zionist elements around the world. And that's been a campaign for decades now. And when you look at who controls the media globally, it is those elements. And that's why their narrative, the Zionist narrative, the imperialistic narrative of America and those aligned with it get far more exposure and, airtime than other voices. And, this is where, we have this problem with Lebanon's image, identity and purpose being, reduced, so limited and taken over by those that want to make it easier for countries like Israel to attack Lebanon, because we are part of the axis of evil. We are part of this, the Iran, grouping, whatever you want to call it, allies, but we're not,
Yeah.
Yes, there's
This
so
is,
much to go into. I don't know
I
how far
know.
to go into, but there's so much.
Perfect. Yes, we have some questions prepared, and this next question you might love, you might hate. Let's talk about it. I watched CNN
Okay.
earlier, and they were telling me that if we want peace, we need to sacrifice Hezbollah.
Mm.
Lebanese people need to revolt against them, get rid of them, and then we can have peace in Lebanon. And the war will be over. Is this true, or is this a lie?
So this is a line that, did you see the message that Netanyahu made a few days ago, calling on the
Yes.
Lebanese people,
Yeah.
and I had quite a few people contact me and send it to me. And I said, just think about this, just listen to his words and watch what he's saying. Don't you remember him saying exactly the same thing 12 months ago to the Palestinians in Gaza, saying, we're coming after Hamas, give up Hamas, abandon Hamas, and you will be saved. We're not after the Palestinians, we're not after the citizens, we're only after Hamas. It's the
Yeah.
same narrative. And it's what he's doing and what those media organizations who are promoting this ideology, all they're doing is giving a just manufactured consent to allow Israel to bombard the hell out of Lebanon and annihilate it the way they did Gaza. It's a propaganda line. It's been perfectly, constructed to serve those interests. Because you see, those words and his voice and those people supporting him are the ones getting onto Western media. So they get onto mainstream media. The alternatives, the alternative viewpoint doesn't make it. It doesn't make it onto mainstream. And that's why in the alternative media space that we're in, social media, we have to present the other, point of view. But to your question, Ali, the problem is we have Lebanon in Lebanon, we're divided. And I witnessed it, and I saw it from the beginning that this was going to be a problem because, they're trying to divide the country and the people. There's a lot of people who dislike Hezbollah in Lebanon, absolutely 100%, because they didn't follow through with Ta'if, they were supposed to hand over their arms and allow the Lebanese army to take full control. That was back in 1992 when the Ta'if agreement was implemented. And Hezbollah, when I talk to politicians, when I've interviewed leaders who are anti-Hezbollah and politicians who are just members of parliament, the point of view of the opposition is that Hezbollah has a gun at our head, and in parliament we have no way of changing laws or fulfilling acting in the national interest, because if we don't follow Hezbollah or we will be assassinated. And we have seen people assassinated, especially 2005, where you had Gibran Twaini, you had Samir Kassir, you had a whole gamut of people. 2006 you had Pierre Gemayel, who was leader of the Qatar party, and so on, where they were all and of course not forgetting Rafiq Hariri on February 14th in 2005. So there's a whole series of people, and that's very true to an extent. And I understand that fear, but it's played up by those parties who are anti-Hezbollah. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it was easy at all, but the argument that Hezbollah is the only problem in Lebanon, and which I try to express and continue to express, that Hezbollah is the cause of all Lebanon's woes, is false. It's incorrect, because Hezbollah wouldn't be able to exist in the political system in Lebanon without the support of those other parties who were all, responsible for leading Lebanon to where it is right now. All of the corruption is not Hezbollah corruption or Amal corruption alone. Amal, Tayyar, the Sunnis, the Maronites, the Orthodox, all of those parties involved in controlling and leading Lebanon over the last 30 years, and the members of parliament, including Walid Judenblatt, including all of those people, have been sitting at the table controlling the politics of Lebanon and the direction of the country. And so they all have to take responsibility. And now we have a situation where, yes, Hezbollah engaged in retaliation with Israel and has been, bombarding or trading fire with Israel for the last 12 months, and it resulted in what we're seeing right now. But it was always going to lead to this. And this was, I think I remember doing a report back in March or April this year about Israel using Resolution 1701 as an excuse to attack Lebanon. And there's a lot of information related to that. But anyway, that's my...
Yeah, so I mean, exactly, that's very true. They're using like these excuses that are just unrealistic, and these statements that just don't make sense to kind of like gauge the population. So for example, when Netanyahu is saying like, give up Hezbollah and then we can and Lebanon will be spared, as if there's just going to be peace if the Lebanese population just gives up Hezbollah. So and on the topic of peace, like, is peace achievable with Israel in the region? And if it is, like, what does it look like? What does peace with Israel look like?
I just want to add something more before I go into that.
Yeah, of course.
I'm being asked to review documents and the roadmap to peace. From different groups, from members of independent organizations and groups, and the roadmap to peace for Lebanon is very dangerous. You're very right about something you just said about the roadmap isn't easy, because the thing is the disturbances within Lebanon right now, the destabilization of Lebanon, the continued attacks by Israel there's a threat that there's going to be a re-emergence and a renewal of little militia elements across the country who are going to form if our government and our army and the world is going to allow Israel to continue to bombard Lebanon. We're going to have chaos in Lebanon. We're going to have a re-emergence of militia who want to fight Israel, and that's going to disrupt the entire country. And there's a real threat of civil conflict, within the country, not against each other, but wanting to destroy Israel again or get Israel out of the country. Those forces, not attack Israel in Israel. Hezbollah has never attacked Israel. It's never invaded. Has never any intention of invading Israel. It's one thing people do not understand. Hezbollah has never had any intention. It's been defending the southern border. To your point now about peace, the roadmap to peace, is there a possibility of peace? Look, Lebanon historically has always had before, unfortunately, the impact of the Arab-Israeli wars on Lebanon, it's always wanted peace. It had an armistice agreement with Israel in 1949, which was a peaceful agreement of coexistence. But Israel has never acknowledged Lebanon's boundaries. It's never acknowledged our territory. And the same with Syria. Syria has never acknowledged Lebanon's territory. So there's been this, limbo and unease about that relationship. Lebanon as a nation is not a warring nation. It's never declared war on anyone as a country. It's, its raison d'etre it's a love for life. If you look at our history, we have been conquered by more warring groups historically, thousands of years of warring groups trying to take over Lebanon. We have never, ever attacked any country. And we've always, unfortunately, fallen to foreign armies because we haven't had a strong army, and we've never taken it that seriously or focused on that, because we're seafaring, we're merchants, we're innovators, we're creators, we're lovers, we're dynamic. You look at what Lebanese have created. It's the land of a biblical land where the Bible was first written by St. Peter and Paul in Biblos. It's got, that is its raison d'etre, not to fight. And we just want to go back there. That's all Lebanese want to do. We just want to love life, live life, and welcome people to Lebanon. As you guys no doubt know, Lebanon
Yeah.
is one of the most amazing countries to come and visit. And no matter who you are, any foreigner who's ever come to Lebanon has been blown away by the, just the spirit of this country and the joy of the people. And they just want to live and love, and the nightclubs and the beach clubs and the restaurants and the conversations and the book clubs and the cafes and all of this life, just the
Yeah.
mountains, the hiking, the just incredible country that is a shame for the world to lose, and we won't, the world won't.
You paint a beautiful picture of Lebanon, which is so true. How beautiful it is, how beautiful its people is, how beautiful the food is. Wow. Yeah, I just wish I was back. But I'm aware right now the painting's a little bit different right now. There's 1 million displaced people from the south, from the different suburbs of Lebanon all over. They're just displaced on the streets, starving, looking for food, looking for shelter. There's hundreds of thousands of kids that are looking for shelter. All these houses that are being bombed. I mean, personally, I've had so many family members who their houses have been hit, and it's in Beirut and elsewhere. It's like it's horrible, honestly, and it's a very dark moment in Lebanon right now.
Definitely.
So, what is the Zionist agenda in Lebanon? What is their end goal? If you say it's not to stop Hezbollah, what is their goal then?
So when you and I've had, because of my work, had the opportunity to literally drown myself in their, footage, content, media, all of the Israeli media. Mm-hmm. From, 30 years to now, like I've been immersed in the Middle East and especially Lebanon, but the last 12 months or so I have literally had an immersion of baptism of like fire on the Israeli side, the Israeli perspective, and watching videos that are being released, like proudly or secretly being released by, Jewish people who are not part of the Zionist ideology, who want the truth to get out. And then you have, media organizations like Channel 12, Channel 13 in Israel, the Haaretz, and other newspapers who are much more balanced, and they're doing their own investigations and reports and revealing stuff. And watching videos from soldiers and army and rabbis and teachers and educators and people, settlers, all of this stuff is coming out. You do have to, I'm lucky, I get thousands of people sharing content because I can't check everything. But when you look at it, the agenda is very clear. And I posted something on one aspect last week about the fact that Israel's agenda has always been, or the Zionist agenda, so I don't want to classify all Israelis because not all Jewish people are aligned to the ideology of the Zionists, and that includes those in Israel and those around the world. They are not Zionists, they're Jewish people, and they do not agree with this policy. Their agenda is to fulfill the Zionist vision of a greater Israel, which was, outlaid by Thomas Herzl, the founder, father of Zionism back in the late 19th century. So they are on a mission, and they started the mission when they first came to Israel, when the Palestinians first started to come to Israel in 1948, or earlier, 1943, they started to migrate, but the mass waves came. But when you look as well at Netanyahu and his speech in the United Nations 1 month before, or only actually a few weeks before October 7, and he showed a map of the Middle East and the green markings of, this is the new Middle East. And, it basically didn't have the names of Syria or Lebanon or Palestine or anything on it, That boundary took Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and part of Saudi Arabia into its formation. And that is him speaking out publicly about their agenda. And he's reshared that. And then you you have so many more people within Israel talking about this, how Lebanon is part of the promised land. You have an article that came out in the Jerusalem Post, but it was taken down on the 25th of September. You could still find it if you search, talking about Lebanon being part of the promised land. So this is the ideology, and then settlers who are now wanting to settle in, South Lebanon, and they've got a website called Urit Safon. I can send it to you, which talks about, colonizing South Lebanon and having a home in South Lebanon, apartments and villas, and they're selling them at $80,000 or 300,000 shekels. So that is ultimately the true intent of Israel. And they're doing it by using propaganda to say, we're going to eliminate Hezbollah for the Lebanese people. We're going to allow you to take back your country and lead, and you will have the chance to, to live and prosper, and we together can live as neighbors, peaceful neighbors. The reality is what Netanyahu is going to say, and his, cabinet, and his next piece of narrative, mark my words, will be, Lebanese weren't able to get rid of Hezbollah, so we had to do it for you. And we're coming in and we're destroying Hezbollah, and we're sorry, but you made us do this. You made us destroy your country because we wanted to get rid of Hezbollah, and this was the only way we could do it.
Oh my goodness.
There you
That's
go.
such an audacious claim as well. Like, I'm just looking at an article talking about the deleted article, how they even want parts of Turkey, and Fish was citing religious texts to support his claims. And it's crazy that they cite religious texts because, for example, when you talk to Greek Orthodox Jews in the US, like I'm always seeing clips or interviews of Greek Orthodox Jews talking about how they don't have this so-called promised land in the Torah, and it's all just nonsense propaganda that's used by the Zionist regime
That's right.
to support their invasion and these
Their policy,
that
their
they're trying.
agenda. Yeah.
It's
See,
crazy.
they created a new book. The Torah is one thing, but they created the
Yeah.
Talmud, which is rewriting, the words of God, to suit their interests. So they're following
Yeah.
a different book.
It's
And
just
that's the
blasphemy.
problem. It's blasphemous, but I can rewrite the Bible right now and call it something else and just pick and choose, which,
Oh my
some
God.
radical Christian groups do, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah,
radical
that's true.
Christian, there's radical Muslim, there's radical
Mm-hmm.
Jewish, there's radical
course.
everything.
Totally.
And they pick and
Yeah.
choose what they take out of their original books.
But like what you mentioning the Zionist regime the Zionist agenda starting back in the late 19th century, all of these plans, all of these decisions that they wanted to take within the region, and how long they've been planning it is to be honest literally insane how much work they've put into doing this. Because I remember I was also doing personal research about this, and I found out about a Zionist politician back in the 1920s. His name is Zeev Jabotinsky. Remember, he wrote a 7-page essay called The Iron Wall, and this was literally what is now the wall that separates the settlers from the Palestinians. He wrote in this essay about how for the settlers to exist, there has to be an unbreachable iron wall that separates these settlers from the native population. And in this essay, like, it's just 7 pages long. It's very easy to find. It's literally called the Iron Wall, and in it he paints this picture where that the Zionists, that they don't hate the Palestinians, they don't like think of them in a bad way or anything, but for their agenda to work, they have to be a majority within that region, and that's the only way for the Palestinians to live safely. And it just like took me aback that he was saying it so like in his writing, it was like so nonchalant the way he was talking about it, as if, yeah, it's like, we can just take this land, we will take care of it, don't worry about it, and nothing's gonna happen to the Palestinian people. They just have to give us their land. But in reality, that's not what's happening. It's much more violent. It's much more chaotic. There's nothing
I
peaceful
don't know
about
if it
this.
was Jabotinsky, but I'm not sure, but it may have been him, because I remember reading, it may have been somebody else, but around the same time, turn of the century,
Yeah.
where someone had written something like that, but then realized how it was going to be used and went out against it and said, you can't do that because it would mean the murder or massacre of the Palestinians. And I'm not sure, I can't remember, I've read so much, but his name rings a bell. But anyway, I mean, yes, I remember when I was studying it, what you're saying is 100% right, but I remember them saying that it wouldn't work peacefully. We would have to massacre them. And that's why when they went ahead and started to migrate, they had already planned, after the Holocaust, they were coming to commit already premeditated plan to commit a Holocaust against the Palestinians so they could take over the land.
I know, right? It's so weird how history repeats itself in so many different ways, and there's so many patterns in society. I mean, everyone was upset about Russia invading Ukraine, another sovereign nation, and then now that the same thing is happening with Lebanon, it's just so weird to see how people have different reactions to the exact same actions based on who's doing it and who's the victim in this situation.
It's all double standards. It's all exposing the double standards. And I think,
it is.
Watching the United Nations, it's encouraging on one side, because you've seen so many nations. Israel is isolated. It's completely isolated at the United Nations. It's not like when when Netanyahu turned up for his most recent speech at the UN. I'm not sure if you saw it, but 90% of the nations evacuated the auditorium. They left the room.
Wow.
He had though a rent-a-crowd sitting up in the back with people up there cheering him on, because if you look at the assembly room, it was empty. So, but every now and then these guys would clap, but it was all the people at the back upstairs who had been invited guests. So it's the United Nations has,
audience.
He needed, because this is the thing also, because the media, the TV stations need a grab. So they just take the sound of applause. This is how you create a grab, it was supported, but a lot of people put it out there on social media that all the people exiting the General Assembly room when he was speaking. So it's, the United Nations, you feel like it's a toothless tiger, and there's a war between Israel and the United Nations now, because so many nations have spoken out, have reported factually against it. And it's been isolated apart from, America and its veto power. Even countries like, Australia has agreed to on certain things to vote for, or abstained at least. It hasn't vetoed in certain votes for Palestine. But the double standards, Ali, you were talking about, are everywhere. And that's been exposed, and they've all different nations. One of the best speeches was by the Pakistani member to the United Nations. Fantastic, eloquent, smashed them, humiliated them. So you see China, Russia, all of these nations, but you see, this is all talk, as well as the Arab countries. It's all talk. They could so easily start to end Israel's encroachment, its massacres, by simply imposing sanctions immediately, each nation imposing sanctions immediately. Some countries have started. France last week announced that it was going to stop sending weapons to Israel. They need to just impose whole-scale sanctions on Israel. There's no other way. They need to tighten the noose and end it, and America in particular. But America's going to be the last country that does that. But when other nations start taking action immediately, America and Israel will be isolated, and they will have to fall into line. But right now, I just don't understand why more nations are just not just imposing sanctions.
What's it going to take?
Aren't they afraid of maybe the repercussions of the United States' actions towards them? Like, I would understand why, because obviously the US always claims that Israel is its number one ally, which is a bold claim to say, because like it feels like it's actually their spoiled child or something, because like they're constantly just paying their bills and like trying to control their tantrums, which is that's what's the case. So they call it its number one ally, and if anyone opposes it, it makes sense why there would be certain repercussions. But what do you think would be those repercussions? Because like it sounds like there's a lot of possible threats, but they're never necessarily stated.
No. So you have to look at leverage. Leverage is the most powerful tool that nations use against one another. And the most effective ones are economic levers, economic relations, economic contracts and deals that have been done between nations. And this is how they get them tied in. And aid. Another one is aid, financial, economic, so many forms of aid, humanitarian aid that they give to countries. And so this is how America manipulates other nations to fall in line with it. But, you've still seen nations say, no, that's going too far. But they're voting for something, but there's no action. So this is where there's a line they're not crossing yet. America's letting them say no, speak out, good on you, go and talk, but you can't really do anything, and you're not really doing anything. And this is what baffles me too. And to this point, it doesn't baffle me really. It's because America has intertwined itself with so many countries. It's played the game so well, but so has Israel. Israel is such a smart country. I mean, they're, politicians and strategists are so intelligent. They have learned how to follow America. They want to be America. They want to control America, and they have got to where they are today because they have played the game even better than America. They're pulling the strings in America. America are puppets right now. There's no doubt about it. But it's not completely, because America's still the biggest empire, and if it wanted to, it could turn off, the switch like that. But the reality is Israel has also created ties with so many countries economically, with Turkey, with Morocco, with Australia, with Britain, with France, with Germany, with countries you wouldn't even see, where they've set up businesses, companies, manufacturing worth billions of dollars to those countries, including Australia, and England. You see it everywhere, but their ties, those countries are going to lose billions of dollars in contracts if they go against Israel. And the point is, what is more important? We had this problem, and it's very interesting because it came up during COVID with Australia when it spoke out against China, and it got, America. Donald Trump told our Prime Minister at the time, Scott Morrison, to accuse China of releasing the virus and condemn them. Such a silly man, such an ignorant fool, a poor politician, wanted to play buddy-buddy with America. That's our former Prime Minister. China ripped the shit out of Australia. It cut off it just ended contracts, billions and billions and billions. Natural resources, wheat, all of these essential, contracts that we've got, Australia needs China for, gone like that. And it's taken a new government to try and repair ties, like 4 years later, to try and repair ties. But China's got a long memory, and there's so much backtracking that Australia's had to do. But this is the same kind of lever that big countries, big economies like China, Russia, America use against smaller nations, and it could decimate them. And that's the levers of power that America is using with many countries. But I say to them, and there's deals with oil and gas. There's so many deals being done now behind the scenes. And I don't know if you've seen recently a new post about the new contracts Israel is issuing for the gas fields of Gaza. It started to issue contracts out to mine and explore the gas and oil fields in Palestinian territory. And they're connected to Italy, France, Britain, America, all those countries. This is what Israel has. Israel's saying, and even to Saudi Arabia and to Jordan and all those Arab countries, it's done a deal. It's been in the works for years. The Ben Gurion Canal. They're saying, we're going to bring the pipeline. We're going to connect the Far East to Europe. We're going to bring the gas and oil of Gaza, because there's much more reserves in their fields. Apparently they're richer than the oil reserves off the Israeli coast and the Lebanese coast. They're taking over, by the way. They want South Lebanon because the oil and gas reserves are in South Lebanon and off the southern coast of Lebanon. Israel wants to take over that area so it can also swallow up our oil and gas fields.
Oh wow!
So this is
sounds
the
like
deals
it's copying the US strategy for Iraq. It's
Iraq
kind of like
and Syria.
That's happening all over again.
Yeah, because America is in Syria, but only in the areas where the oil fields are. It controls Syria's oil fields. It's going bankrupt, Syria, because it doesn't get any funds and money from the revenue from the oil fields anymore.
Right.
And this is the same strategy. You're absolutely right. But this is the levers they use to keep people on their side, keep nations on their side. We promise you these contracts. You've got these deals. This is what Netanyahu is brilliant at. Deal making. He did a deal with the far right to get back into power. And look at them. Look at what's happening in Israel. He wants to become a dictator, change the Supreme Court laws so that he has, that the parliament has more control over the judiciary and the Supreme Court, the High Court of Israel, take away their powers. This is where it's leading. It's leverage. Leverage is everything. Follow the money, follow the contracts, follow the interests of the nations, and why people are shutting up, not doing anything, and why others are also taking action in the actions they're taking.
Wow. I've never heard this perspective before, to be honest. This is new information to me, and I've done a lot of research into this too, so this is amazing, and we need to hear more of this kind of narrative to really understand and expose
There's a lot.
The Zionist movement. Daizy, I have a question about journalism. I didn't realize that being a journalist could be such a dangerous job. I thought journalists go on TV and they just report the news and such, but apparently if you're Lebanese or Palestinian, then journalism equals,
But it's not only Lebanese or Palestinian, journalists all over the world. But there's been a significant concentration. Highest number of journalists killed in any conflict has been the Gaza war conflict. But
you're incredibly brave too. I mean, before you were involved with the Zionist reporting, you were involved with the internal Lebanese reporting and interviewing all these different Lebanese leaders and exposing them and exposing the corruption and the fraud within Lebanon, and now you're doing the same with Zionists. I mean, how do you do that and survive? I
Mm.
guess is what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, it's I guess, and that's why I started this. I said to Said, I'm so glad that you're focusing on journalism because it's my calling. I got given a gift and a way to express and tell stories that God gave me, to see things, to be able to sit with people, to be able to get people to trust me, but to be able to get the truth out of people and wanting to. I live by, since I was a child, I've always lived by truth and justice. Like fairness is so innate in me. I don't like to be unfair. I won sportsmanship awards at school and stuff like that, and but it's just in my nature. And so going into journalism, not didn't when I went into it, it wasn't really about that, but it was at my core. And eventually, when I moved from sports writing, so you knew I was a sports writer, right? The first female soccer writer in Australia. I loved sport. I loved sport because sports is about sportsmanship. It's about playing on a level playing field and being
Yeah.
fair with the rules. But then I discovered Lebanon and asked to be transferred to the foreign desk, and then my whole life changed. But doing journalism is a very dangerous sport, career, art form, if you want to stand up for those values. And I live by truth and justice, and they are the fundamentals for us as human beings. They are the only things that matter because everything comes from there. It's all about honesty. If you can be truthful, you should be honest, and it just gives you strong foundations and guides your ethics. It guides the way you live your life, and fairness. I mean, even with my children, I have 3 kids who are now between 20 and 24, and even with them growing up, it was like I couldn't give more to one than the other. It was like internally, it was like I felt sick. It was like no. One of my children was very spoiled. My second one, I love her to death. Her name's Paris. I love you. But she always wanted more and more and more. It was like never. I was like, no way, I can't. And I was like, try to, explain to her it's just not fair. And so that drives me. And so getting into, this area and delving into Lebanon and re-engaging in Lebanon, is about 7-8 years ago now, because I sort of took a break when I was pregnant, having kids and starting up my business and everything. And then I got called back, literally called back. I'm not weird, but I got a call in my head from God saying it's time. That's all he said. It's time. And I knew what he meant, that it was time to go back and make another film about Lebanon, because after making my first film, I always knew I would be doing a sequel. So going back and, going into that, discovering in 2017, I thought Lebanon was really cool and we'd gotten over the war and it was prosperous and, but going back in 2017, 6 weeks, and then going, oh my God, the corruption is so bad. The people are suffering and this has got to get out. So that's what happens. That's if it's at your core, you just get pulled into discovering and scratching the surface more and more and asking more and more questions. And then when you get the opportunity to sit across from the former Prime Minister of Lebanon, Saad Hariri, and you're asking him about what you're doing about corruption, and he gives you his story, and I said, excuse me, but the people of Lebanon say that it's you, along with ABC, and I named them all, who are, enabling the corruption. And that, I mean, at that moment in the interview, I was very nervous. But I remembered what my responsibility was. And that's what journalists do. They remember what their responsibility is. If you're true, your responsibility is bringing the voice of the people and the opinions of the people. My responsibility was to ask that question, to be brave enough to put it to him and allow him to answer it. And I put it to a lot of other leaders, in Lebanon.
Yeah.
That's our job. And then, when you put the piece, as long as you're putting the story together correctly, not sensationalizing, you tell a story that people trust. And that was the most important thing for me to do with my documentary Enough, and then with everything I do. And I say that to my team. I have a reputation, and I have a very clean reputation. Everything I've ever done has always been verified, and I try to maintain my credibility, because my reputation is everything. And so I make sure to check what I'm doing, what I'm saying, what I'm posting, whatever stories I'm doing is trying to ensure that the information is correct so people trust it. So yes, it's a risk. And even when I came back to Lebanon in 2022 to launch my documentary in Lebanon, I had been warned not to come back. I had been told that it's dangerous for me because I'm exposing the corruption in Lebanon through my documentary. And I really did panic for about a month, 6 weeks, and it delayed me going back to Lebanon. But in the end, I said, my God, I have to go back. I made this film for Lebanon, for the Lebanese. I'd been traveling. I'd been at festivals around the world. The diaspora was seeing it, but the people of Lebanon were needing it. And the elections, I was coming to release it just before the elections. So I had to get security. I had to take precautions. And thank God, knock on wood, nothing happened to me. There was some talk of, we had the screening in Martyr Square. It was an open air screening because we took it on tour. And so it was very dangerous, but we had notified the authorities, they'd approved it, and there were intelligence and army around, and they did stop negative elements from coming into or disrupting it. But, I've got a saying, it's on my website. I said, I don't need a job. I don't need money. I don't want to be famous, but I don't want to be a martyr. I just want to save Lebanon. I just want to change Lebanon. And that goes for, that I changed it because after Gaza and everything, it was like, I just want to change the world. I want to make the world better. It's, I certainly don't want to die, and I want to be there when my kids have kids, I want to see my grandkids. I just want to be able to help, contribute.
I want you to live. I want you to thrive. I think the most important thing we can do is share the truth. And that's the thing that people who do crimes are the most afraid of: the truth, the law, accountability, justice. All these things are things that the Zionist element is afraid of, exposing their war crimes, exposing their plans. And so it's incredibly brave of you to do all the journalism that you're doing and spread all the knowledge that you're sharing. Much appreciated, and looking forward to the next documentary, the next film.
Thank you very much.
What can we do? Me inside right here, and then everyone else back home. We're all so. Well, how can we help Lebanon right now? I know there's so much suffering right now. I'm trying my best to, do through this podcast is a way for us to spread the knowledge and awareness in the Lebanese perspective. What can someone else do? The listeners, the viewers of this podcast. How can we help Lebanon together?
Well, talking about this and sharing this podcast, and I got to tell you, I was checking your podcast, and I think I sent an email back saying, a lot of your guests have nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Do you think your audience want to know what I'm talking about? But, then I found your pod with Michael Schertzer, and I loved it. I loved it. By the way, I interviewed him. I interviewed him because of you guys 2 days ago. I loved him.
Let's go. He's incredible.
That's great.
He's incredible. So I told him that was a fantastic pod. And what I say to you is this, like, you need to keep doing more because you have an audience. And the thing is, people want to know more. People are like the average Joe Blow is interested. And what you should do is continue. I know it might be hard because you've got different interests in your subject matter, but you need to intersperse it with much more diverse views or different views and guests who are bringing that point of view and different angles to this story. So especially Jewish people, there's an incredible academics, former IDF officers, former Mossad chiefs, so many people that you can invite on and speak to and share and promote your pods with, you know, by doing that sort of stuff. The voice and the opinion has to continue to get out, and we need to reach as many people who are, you know, not plugged in. But more people are getting plugged in. More people are saying, my God damn, it's been a year and this thing still isn't over. I need to know why. And the student revolution across America and across the world was excellent. Getting students in, you know, getting that voice out there is really important. That's what we can do. That's what I'm going to continue to do. But I am going to try and do something a bit more when I go back to Australia. There's a few things I hope to, you know, expand into so that I can get more reach. But with the listeners, with our audience, what I keep saying to them is you've got to take up the baton. We're leading, but we need you. We need this army to take up the baton and continue by sharing, by, you know, engaging, by not only that, by speaking to your local representatives, by sending an email, by, you know, making a phone call and saying ceasefire now. You know, it's an injustice. It's blatant, you know, abuse of the international law of human rights. We're not stupid. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your education is. I don't care what. It's black and white. It's right and wrong. And everything is that simple right now. That's all it is. There's an aggressor, and they're manipulating the narrative, the story, to make us believe that they're the victim. But we're all not that dumb. And we should just say that in black and white in simple terms to our politicians, because they're the ones that are going to get scared. They're not going to get re-elected next time. That's all that matters to them. They want to be re-elected. They have the power. You see, they have the power. That's a very important lever that we can all apply, and the leverage we can impose by using our voices. And the other one is the Boycott, Divest, Sanctions movement. There are big companies who are losing money, and we've seen what we've been able to do with Starbucks and McDonald's and Zara. There's a lot of companies that are being affected by the Boycott, Divest, Sanction movement. That's another thing that people can do. They can find out, and if they go to the BDS, you know, pages on Instagram, whatever, they're on all of social media. You can see the list of companies: Pepsi, Coca-Cola, KFC, everything. You need to stop. You need to stop buying their products. You need to stop going into their businesses, because they are funding the genocide. They are funding Israeli military operations. They're funding media. They're funding so many businesses and corporations that are involved in the genocide. And even if you are not that interested in Palestine and Israel, the fact of the matter is that this doesn't end with Palestine or Lebanon. If they get away with it, with Palestine and Lebanon, that's not where it's going to end. It's going to be the next nation and the next country and the next. They're going to keep weakening nations and doing whatever they want if that nation doesn't play ball with them. The bully needs to be blocked and stopped. And we can do that individually, so, you know, quietly. If you're too scared, because I know a lot of people are worried, we can do it by taking those economic actions, by imposing economic sanctions on those businesses that are funding this ideology and these actions. So there you go.
Amazing.
That's been great. Yeah.
Yeah. To add on to
Daisy,
that, I think there is a good reason to be scared. This problem's bigger than all of us, and it's when you're talking about these big powers, you can feel helpless, hopeless, that you can't do anything, and there's so many emotions tied to it. But I think you have to do everything that Daizy said. That's a way for you as an individual, as communities, to make a change in the world. And for that reason alone, we need you to be brave, not scared in this moment. We need you to act and not stand by during this critical time.
There are two posts that triggered me. Sorry. You saying that was there's a video that's just going around right now on social media, which is, a futuristic one, 16 years from now. And it's the young children asking their grandparents or their parents, what did you do during the genocide? And it's really a powerful video because, that's it. What did you do? What did you say? How did you act? And to your point about, when individuals say, who am I? I'm one voice. What can I do? I don't know if you saw a graphic that was posted 8 months ago. It said, who am I? I'm one voice. I can't do anything to stop the genocide. And underneath it said 7 billion people. Every one voice saying that. That's 7 billion people saying the same thing. But if we all said, took action and said no, that would be 7 billion people standing up for humanity and for justice.
That is so true. Daizy, thank you for articulating the Lebanese perspective so well and so clearly for people to listen in, understand it, and take in this information with not just mixed information. It's clear, concise, and accurate information, because everything you were saying can easily just be looked up with a Google search and confirmed that it is correct.
That's right.
And thank you for your time, for being on this podcast, helping us disseminate this information and to be able to share it with our audience. I just want to say again, thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and keep doing what you're doing. Where can people connect with you, and how can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
My name, Daizy Gedeon. Use that name at Daizy Gedeon on any platform. That's my handle for social media. You can message me. I've got my website. It's at Daizy Gedeon. You can email me. I get emails. I respond. I'm on LinkedIn. There's so many ways you can reach out, and I do respond because I'm very grateful to people who connect with me, and I really want those who are listening and who are confused, reach out. I'm happy to have a chat and help you understand things, because that's where the power comes from. Knowledge is power, and we just need to get more and better informed to make us feel like we have the right to speak out. And I think a lot of people don't speak out because they feel that they're ignorant. You're not ignorant. You've just been misled. So, get informed. Have a look on my Instagram. There's a lot of good information there that will, inform you and keep you up to date. But do reach out. I'm very happy to connect and speak and do what I can to add to your knowledge.
Awesome. Daizy, thank you so much. And
thank you, guys.
This is how we end the podcast. We salute to cover the camera. This one will add كلنا للوطن.
كلنا للوطن.
We did it.
Awesome.
Ciao.
يعيش لبنان.
يعيش لبنان.
Yeah.